What is going on with Michigan? Like, it feels like you could just refresh your feed every single time on any social media platform and there would be a new story as it pertains to the Wolverines and Jim Harbaugh. Pete Thamel from ESPN, who is pretty much like the equivalent of Adam Schefter or Woj for college football, what he is to those platforms, Pete Thamel is to college football. He put out a tweet that said the Big Ten expects a response from Michigan on notice of discipline by the end of today. So if you're watching this after Wednesday, there might be more developments on this, and we'll have those obviously on this channel. He also said don't expect a ruling from the Big Ten on Wednesday as they're expected to take time to absorb Michigan's response. So what does that mean for us as the college football public? Hey, just sit tight. We're getting closer, nothing really. Sit tight, hang with it. There's more coming down the pipe here pretty soon, but things are moving. Now, the most interesting development in this whole saga to this point is a story that came out, and The Athletic has a great piece on it. Staffers from Ohio State, Purdue, and Rutgers have all allegedly shared signs or shared what they have determined when it comes to Michigan signs. Basically, they all kind of tried to get the signs from Michigan of what they do on their sideline, shared them together, and have submitted this to Michigan. So the way that this came about was a staffer that I believe was formerly at Purdue. He's no longer in college football, had some friends on Michigan staff, and he said, hey, I kind of just want to make sure y'all have this. People were sharing your signs actually as well. But the thing that I was confused by was like, okay, you shared signs, coaches share film. Okay, you looked at their sideline, you didn't send anybody to a game, so you weren't necessarily like going to the degree that Connor Stallions went. So where do we stand here? And so naturally, I hit up Andy Staples. I said, Andy, you are one of the greatest covering college football. Is this actually against the rules? He said there's no rule against what they're doing, but it does more or less go against like the general sportsmanship policy within the Big Ten of, hey, let's all get together to try and take down this one team. So in that way, yeah, it does feel a little bit funny, but I think there's a couple of different sides to this that we have to unpack when it comes to this whole development with these Big Ten schools. I don't know if colluding is the right word, but getting together to get Michigan signs and to try and take them down essentially. One, like Michigan is still in the wrong here. Michigan is still in the wrong here because what happened here in my mind is the equivalent of students getting together and sharing study guides where Michigan was still looking over at the answers to the test. Okay, so at the end of the day, Michigan, when it comes to the way these rules are written, they still broke the rules. Now, what these schools did, and I don't think it was just these schools when it comes to the extent of schools breaking rules in the college football landscape, we'll talk about that here in just a second, doesn't necessarily feel that great if you're a Michigan fan today because it feels like, hey, what we did, they did the exact same thing. They just did it in a different manner. Yes, true. Dan Wetzel has a great article on this actually as well that's on, I believe it's Yahoo. Go check that out as well. Phenomenal insight. He compares it to like a white-collar crime to a blue-collar crime. He's like, hey, Connor Stallions, he pulled up with a ski mask and said, give me the signs. I'm taking these however I can take them. Whereas the other schools, they were sign stealing in game, got together after the fact, and then talked about it later and kind of found a way to put these together to try and take down Michigan. The bottom line is it didn't work either way if you were trying to take signs from Michigan because they still won the Big Ten last season and throttled Purdue in the Big Ten title game. But like at the end of the day here, what we're trying to talk about is when it comes to advanced scouting, they both did it. But again, I think the advanced scouting that these schools did was, again, quote unquote, within the rules. Whereas what Michigan did, what Connor Stallions did, that's against the rules. Again, this is all assuming that what we have in front of us is considered to be proven. All right? So that's the first thought. Michigan, you broke the rules. The other schools, they did a similar thing. They did it inside the lines, technically. Was it like poor sportsmanship to a degree? Yeah, probably. But it wasn't breaking the rules. Michigan, you broke the rules. You still cheated. It's not necessarily apples to apples here. The other side of this is, what was the key thing people talked about when they were just going to town against Michigan? Hey, this was an unfair advantage. Michigan is just ruining the perfectly level playing field that we have in the college football landscape. Well, the Purdue staffer, who again is no longer a Purdue staffer, submitted this to Michigan, and Michigan has now submitted this, I understand, to the Big Ten, and they're saying basically the advantage that people are saying Michigan had by having these signs, other schools had the equivalent of that. So to say that somehow we had this perfectly even landscape that Michigan ruined, I think that's a pretty difficult one to hold up with here, because I think at the end of the day, like, everybody agrees that what Michigan did was against the rules. It was cheating. Where we differ is the punishment and the impact of what Michigan did from a cheating standpoint that it had on their success. Like Paul Feinbaum, as of this morning, I believe, came out and said that he thinks that Jim Harbaugh should be suspended indefinitely. No disrespect to Paul Feinbaum. I think he's one of the greatest to ever do it, one of the greatest in this space for sure. But are we really thinking we want to suspend Jim Harbaugh because of this whole situation when we have other coaches in the same space that have the same kind of advantage that he has? Like, the thought that Michigan now is Michigan and they're the back-to-back Big Ten champs because of the sign-stealing stuff is just irresponsible. Because we're not looking at the fact that they have a bunch of NFL draft picks on their roster. And this Athletic article said the exact same thing. I believe it was an anonymous source that said, the messed up part about this, I'm paraphrasing, is that Michigan didn't need to cheat. They're good enough to probably win the Big Ten without that. They're better than Ohio State. They're better than Penn State. Their words, not mine. We'll see what happens this season, but that was the case the last couple of years. So now a lot of people, in response to the way that we've kind of approached this whole Michigan situation, they say, well, JD, you're excusing cheating? You're okay with cheating? No one is excusing cheating. No, I'm telling you Michigan should be punished. I'm saying the right answer with how we handle this and how we assess this is, as it usually is, somewhere in the middle. You got two extreme camps, and we talked about it yesterday in our Q&A. One camp, probably the folks in Ann Arbor, saying, well, you got to prove it. We didn't do anything wrong. We're not going down for any of this. Okay, that's one extreme. The other extreme is probably closer to what I think Paul Feinbaum is saying, and saying, well, Jim Harbaugh should be suspended. Michigan should be, and to be clear, Paul Feinbaum did not say this latter portion. There are some people calling for the Big Ten to bar Michigan from playing in the Big Ten title game. They're saying that the college football playoff should keep Michigan out of the playoff. That's another extreme standpoint. So what I would say is, again, the right answer typically is somewhere in the middle. Somewhere in the middle of those two extremes. Should Michigan be punished for breaking the rules? Absolutely. If you break rules, there should be consequences. Did Michigan have some sort of advantage by sign stealing illegally? If that's true, 100%. You don't cheat unless it helps you, right? But to assume that Michigan is Michigan because of what they did, and to assume that this landscape was just perfectly even before this whole situation became a reality, I think we're kidding ourselves. Because the other thing I would say here is, are we expected to believe that the information submitted here is where it ends? Like, this staffer that submitted this, submitted information that wasn't directly against the rules, but it walked directly up to the line of breaking rules. And so we're supposed to believe, hey, they walked right up to the line, or other schools across the college football world walking right up to that line, but they won't cross it. And this is kind of that cop-out answer of, well, if everybody's cheating, is anybody cheating? And that's not what I'm saying, but I am saying to assume that the level playing field was perfectly level before all of this, and to assume that this is where it ends, I have an issue with that. And I think that's not totally the proper context to view this whole situation through. So here's my hypothetical to you. If you want to suspend Jim Harbaugh, let's talk about it. If I were Tony Petitti, commissioner of the Big Ten, I would say this. All right, we'll suspend Jim Harbaugh, or we'll put it to a vote to suspend Jim Harbaugh across the league on one condition. If you vote to suspend Jim Harbaugh, then we have to have total, complete access of your entire operation as a football program. And if we find one thing, whether it's a walk-on getting improper benefits that scholarship players are getting, which I don't know how that works with NIL now, whether it's you went over that hour-a-week rule, whether it's you were using the football during winter conditioning, whatever, if we find one thing, your vote does not count. Are you prepared to take that deal? I think you would have a lot of people across the college football world kind of turn their heads, kind of keep a low profile and say, you know what, never mind. I think that's the response you would get if you were to put it to a vote. So complete hypothetical, that's where we feel on this whole situation. We're not excusing Michigan. Cheating is wrong. Michigan is wrong for cheating. Is it the reason why Michigan won 2 Big Ten titles the last 2 years? I think we're kidding ourselves if that's the case, if that's how we feel about it. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.